Hi, I'm Tim Wall, Senior Reporter for Pet Food Industry, and thank you for joining us for Ask the Pet Food Pro. This edition is From Pouch to Purpose, Packaging Trends Shaping Pet Care's Future. Ask the Pet Food Pro connects experts with industry professionals and offers the opportunity to pose questions directly. Ask the Pet Food Pro is brought to you by Pet Food Forum and Pet Food Industry's journalists and editors. Drawing our combined decades of experience covering the dog, cat, and other pet food markets, you can find our reporting and analysis at petfoodindustry.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter and monthly magazine. Today's discussion focuses on the trends that are shaping the future of pet food packaging. Thank you to PrintPack for sponsoring this edition of Ask the Pet Food Pro, and another thanks to our expert guest, Bill Barlow, Senior Market Development Manager at PrintPack. Welcome, Bill, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Tim. Yeah, appreciate it. This is great. I'm really excited about the opportunity.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Bill. But before we do start our discussion, I have a few little announcements for everybody out there. Audience members, you have all been muted to ensure that everyone can hear the discussion. And I've included many of the questions that you sent in beforehand into the script that we'll be going over, some of the questions that we do during the show. But please submit any other questions that you come up with during the show into the chat box. Let me actually just make sure that the chat box is set to everyone. There you go. Now you can go into the chat box and post any questions that you have for us. Please note that this chat is being recorded and attendees will get access to the recording starting in about a week after the show. Let's get started. To begin, let's look at the big picture on everything. To start off, could you give us a snapshot of some of the biggest market shifts that you're seeing in the pet food and pet care markets today that are influencing packaging decisions?
Yeah, Tim, it's a great start. So overall, I'll say that the pet food market seems resilient right now, even though it has reached a market size of about $43 billion. At least that's what we're seeing, with a little over about 1% growth this last year. So not as big a growth as we've seen in the past, but it's definitely still resilient. And there's a few things that may be influencing that. We see some economic trends such as inflation, consumer caution and cost and spending, softening labor markets, new tariffs. Those all continue to restrain the category expansion as a whole. However, this may result, we'll talk more about this, and maybe it's more basic packaging, maybe not as many special features, offering lower cost packaging and different options for consumers that meet their budget. But it also presents an opportunity for growth in maybe even smaller packaging formats where the product price point is lower for consumers in general. Overall, there's a huge market shift towards fresh pet food. And I know we'll probably dig into that some more. It's kind of a quest for human grade ingredients, better for you ingredients. In addition to that, we're also seeing a tremendous growth in cat food and treats specifically. Cat owners seem to be increasing. That out of the whole pet care market is projected to grow 4 to 5% over the next several years. So that's something we really need to focus on from a packaging perspective. More innovation in packaging for like ease of treating with cats and making things fun, new experiences, and creating emotional connections. The market share overall for big brands is under pressure from innovation and value segments in the market. We're seeing nearly all brands, at least major brands, are experiencing some sales declines in the last year. But on the flip side, we're also seeing some gain in the private label area, which has reached between 11 and 12% market share. And then in addition to that, with some the others category, including those fresh brands, we've seen growth from 10 to 15% in the market over the last year. So that's been an overwhelming shift that we've seen as the fresh pet food coming along. Again, pet food remains pretty resilient just due to family member value perception. The majority of owners are still viewing pets as family members. So there's a humanization element and trend that's happening. And then lastly, I don't want to forget there's a new trend. Well, I mean, not new, but it's growing, is multi-form feeding. And that creates a lot of opportunities for new packaging trends as well. So that's kind of a big picture scope of how I see things shaping up, at least in the last couple of years, Tim.
Gotcha. So you mentioned that really impressive growth with fresh pet foods. It seems like that would really maybe call for some different types of packaging than your regular pet foods. So when we're talking about the fresh and refrigerated products, how is that shift changing the way a brand needs to think about their packaging materials, their format, their shelf life, all that?
Yeah, definitely. The fresh pet food appears to be going mainstream. I believe, like Fresh Pet, as an example, I believe is a $1 billion brand now, and have had a tremendous amount of success over the last few years. I think they even had 20% sales gain over this last year. So have to fact check me on that, but I think it's quite substantial. So hats off to that company. But we're now seeing major brands shift and launch fresh food lines, Blue Buffalo, Mars, and others in the market. It's viewed, I think, by the consumer as as healthier, as more transparent, higher quality ingredients, especially by younger owners and perhaps in that Gen Z market or target market. That growth is really driven by these new adopters seeking human grade ingredients. But for packaging, what that means is higher barrier packaging, more robust structures, hermetic seals, making sure there's no leakers, gas flushing, retortable packaging for shelf stable. There's so many of those things that are required to improve shelf life that now that's needed. It's a different from our dry kibble historically. So those traditional polyester, polyethylene, or woven polypropylene, or even multi-wall paper sacks that are used for dry kibble in the market may not be the best solutions anymore. In addition to that, so when you talk about fresh or even frozen products that require frozen, thawed, refrigeration, and maybe even frozen again, you've got a whole new set of elements that the package has to withstand, right? So it's additional abuse and conditions that the pet food packaging is going to have to hold up to that dry kibble has never been exposed to. So we have to almost start from scratch and make sure we're addressing all of those concerns and needs. So, and another thing for brand to consider is, hey, these fresh products, they need to have refrigeration in the retailer. How is that done? Are they buying shelf space or getting shelf space in the fresh areas, or are they having to put in refrigerators and adding that to the retailer? So there's additional needs for that to preserve the product.
Yeah, it's definitely getting a lot more complex, the needs of fresh foods and all that. And at the same time, you had mentioned mixed feeding or multiform feeding earlier. And so the entire feeding habits themselves, or the feeding regime is becoming more complex. We're seeing, I saw this at Global Pet Expo, a lot of pet foods that were mixing different formats of like a freeze-dried raw with a regular kibble, et cetera, et cetera. So when we're seeing that rise of the multi-form or multi-format pet foods, that are bringing in some of the aspects of kibble, some of the aspects of wet foods, toppers, treats. How is that trend of all those things, that complexity, how is that influencing packaging design?
Absolutely, Tim. So yeah, we found the same thing that a majority of cat and dog owners right now are purchasing dry food as a foundation and then mixing in wet foods and toppers to that to add different experiences for their pets, creating different occasions and emotional connections and bonds. Typically, those toppers are used to flavor and for health enhancements, which adds a lot of choice and experience. But that multi-form feeding creates cross-selling opportunities and complexity, as you mentioned, for the brands. So brands can differentiate by elevating the experience of feeding, right? And so what that means is an opportunity for brands to connect the packaging from the dry to the wet to the toppers through color, through format, and even package design, which we can help with. So, in essence, creating product lines that have cohesive, flexible packaging families. That could mean, like an example of that could be like a modular stand-up pouch system. That's a large stand-up pouch for kibble, a medium size for a retort, wet food, and then maybe even a smaller pouch or a stick pack for a topper. That could all be complementary to each other. And maybe there's opportunity to include that as a package deal as part of into a secondary package. So there's a lot of opportunities for packaging as these multi-form feeding expands, but it's going to create so much more opportunity for smaller pack size, smaller portion sizes, as I mentioned.
Yeah, so you mentioned there package deal, but so that brings in like some ideas of maybe like a broader strategic question of how using some of that the packaging, mixing different packages, combining them together, all these different ways that packaging can influence a consumer. From your perspective with print pack, what's telling you that the pet care market is now looking to packaging as a way to play a strategic role in presenting their products?
We're following the trends mainly of premiumization and humanization to guide us and influencing those packaging requirements with premium human grade ingredients being used. There's product transparency that's required. So including clear windows in the packaging, which means clear barrier options, something like an aluminum oxide coated polyester or polyethylene or propylene that could be incorporated. A clean label, so clear communication on the packaging to consumers. We know that pets or pet owners will buy the best they can for their pets, but being able for having the package to demonstrate and show, those signals in the market is important. So packaging can play an important role in the market shift. We see opportunities in three key areas. I mentioned before, high barrier, recyclable monomaterial flexible films that are specifically engineered for refrigerated frozen conditions, resealable multi-serve fresh pouches, oxygen moisture control for partial and multiple use, and then maybe even vacuum sealed flexible pouches for extended shelf life and reduced preservatives. So there's a lot of that going on that can influence how packaging will play a strategic role in the growth of those particular markets and within the market.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's certainly the first thing that the consumer sees is their packaging. It's if anything, the thing that they interact with the most, since they're not going to be eating what's inside of it. So let's shift to that consumer side of the equation and
Sure.
really look at how pet owners are now increasingly expecting products to support pet health and wellness, things like that. How can packaging help communicate that freshness, quality, safety more effectively up there on the shelf?
That's great, Tim. I'm glad you brought that up because packaging is not just a vessel to store and transport the product, right? It is a canvas that can help tell a story and communicate to the consumer the benefits of that product. So taking advantage of that, whether it's a certain way it sits on the shelf, it's a certain color, the form, the font that's used, how grab somebody's attention, clear communication of the product, like no additives or preservatives. Like, how do you really showcase that and separate that from a competitive product on the shelf? So brands are now linking functional health benefits with also sustainable messaging to differentiate. We've seen things like keywords being used: humanly raised, ethically sourced, upcycled, made with sustainable products, sustainably sourced materials. So there's a lot of that going on. And then in addition to that, we see that there's an opportunity from a health perspective, of more portion control. So right sizing packaging, again, it speaks to the smaller pack sizes for overall pet health. So for those pets that may be overweight or have other health issues, being able to control exactly how much to use, it may be easier for the consumer to buy a smaller pack and have that help with their pet's health goals. And again, I brought it up, but clear windows, clear barrier on the package really can help visually communicate freshness and the real ingredients of that product. So something brands need to consider as well.
Yeah, seeing is believing.
That's right.
So let's get a little bit beyond that idea of the health and all that. That is, of course, probably the most important thing to people. But something
Sure.
that's also important is convenience, and that can
Yeah.
change people's purchasing behavior. So, what packaging features are most resonating nowadays with pet owners?
I think there's features that not only resonate with pet owners, but just general consumers and across the board in our market in flexible packaging for food. Those can be easy open features. So especially like on a stick pack or a stand-up pouch for treats. Easy serve, reclose features for multiple servings on stand-up pouches specifically. The multi-portion feeding, portion control, lickable or moist treats. That's really growing in the cat segment as an example. I also see opportunity for easy pour, clean hand formats, not just in pet food, but in litter as well for pet care. Something that's easy to grip, easy to handle, adding tactile finishes, elevating the feel and premiumization of the package. Another trend or feature that's resonating is on the go packaging. There's, this is growing with pet owners that are on the move. There's more single pet parents out there than ever before. So pets are traveling a lot with their pet owners. And so having on the go packaging is certainly important. And then what's resonating also is just that communication of premiumization on the package. And there could be printed QR codes, storytelling on the package, something that's really echoing the consumer interaction and experience between the pet owner and our furry friends. So a lot of opportunity on the package there.
Yeah, yeah. Moving on from convenience, you mentioned earlier sustainability and some of the trends that are really resonating with consumers there. And I know you were at Global Pet Expo as well, and that was one of the things that I saw in some of the sessions there is how pet owners tend to be more inclined to buy products marketed as sustainable than your average consumer. So with sustainability as a growing concern in the consumer packaged goods in general, and even more so in pet food, how are those expectations
Yeah.
influencing packaging choices?
Yeah, it's interesting. Folks or consumers are expecting brands to take the lead in sustainability, and not just with the sustainable sourcing of their product or the making of their product, but also the packaging, where it's coming from, and the impact to the overall environment. So that's still a huge topic. I see in the pet care market, and I think most of my colleagues will agree, that recyclable polyethylene remains at the top of the sustainability demand within brands for pet care market. The incorporation of recycled content, that discussion continues to grow, that conversation continues to grow, but there's still hesitancy on mechanical post-consumer recycled content just due to organoleptic concerns and palatability. But it creates opportunities for advanced recycled materials and incorporating that, still reducing overall virgin plastic usage. I do feel, although there's a need to develop recyclable PE packaging and it continues to dominate, the conversations in the market, it's just been a very slow shift. And the adoption rate is still very low, but it doesn't mean that we're stopping working on it. Currently, PrintPack has several active developments specifically for recyclable polyethylene, designed for circularity, intended for store drop off. And we're doing that in stand-up pouches. We're doing that in flat bottom bags and looking at large quad seal pinch bottom bags as well. So a tremendous amount of plastic that gets used there. But that testing and development, those cycles have taken multiple years to prove out the concepts and improve the overall performance. But what it comes down to is it really takes a partnership between the brand and converter. And that's what we want. We want our brands that we work with to view us as a partner and a development partner, and that we're in this together. And that's the best way I can suggest approaching sustainability.
Yeah, sustainability is so important, but like you were saying before, the recycling can sometimes be a little difficult because of some of the needs of pet food, keeping it fresh and all that. So when pet food companies want that sustainable packaging, how do they deal with those trade-offs when they have to struggle with managing cost, performance,
Yeah.
infrastructure challenges? What do you see the most realistic progress on that right now?
Yeah, and that's been evolving over the last, I would say, decade, but specifically since COVID. We all know that sustainable packaging options come at a premium, but there's still some of those performance trade-offs that we need to consider, whether it's barrier or stiffness, puncture, heat resistance, toughness. Ease of opening was one of those things that we got all the way through a development process, but the package didn't open as well as they wanted to. And so ultimately there's got to be some trade-off. We recognize that we can't fix everything all at once. We'll get there, but it's been an evolution. But ultimately, brands with us will have to make a choice on what's most important for their product and the consumer when it comes to sustainability. Cost, yeah, is the main driver there again, but Printpack's still actively commercializing with three major brands now on stand-up pouch, and that's for both roll stock and pre-made options. That's all intended for store drop-off. I want to just mention real quickly, and I don't want to go into great details here, but I think that brands are also waiting to really see how EPR bills and fees influence decisions for packaging requirements. I think some folks are being proactive when we're seeing those active developments we're working on, but it's really not clear to me if the EPR bills or fees will outweigh the cost to transition to sustainable packaging. I don't know if that's holistically been looked at and considered yet, I guess we'll know very soon as these schemes roll out. But this will certainly influence decisions of brands here in the near future. I can say that supply chain for print films that are used for recyclable packaging, such as machine direction oriented or biaxially oriented polyethylene films, it's getting better, but it's still not at the scale we need it to be to drive the costs out for recyclable packaging. And finally, we all know this, but we still don't have a solution to the infrastructure problem. It goes without saying with regards to collecting and physically recycling. There's signs that the concept can work, and I truly believe that it can at some capacity, but recognize that it's going to take additional decades and billions of dollars of investment, to have that infrastructure to handle these materials. But again, it doesn't mean that we're going to stop working on it, Tim.
Yeah, yeah, it's so important for pet food, especially because flexible packaging is, the
Yeah.
dominant form. And I think EPR, like you're saying, is definitely going to be, influencing that. So let's get a
Yes.
little bit more into flexible packaging, though, because I was
Okay.
saying, you go to a pet food aisle, it's mostly flexible packaging.
Yeah.
So considering how widely used it is, where do you believe that there are how is it falling short? How is it letting brands or consumers down?
I think one thing that comes to mind, and this has been a recent discussion, is flexible packaging may not be optimized for like e-commerce durability, burst risk, sealing failures. I think there's room for development for certified flexible packaging, for drop testing, leak proof, things of those areas. And along the same lines with online shopping, I think there's limited differentiation between in-store and online SKU packaging. So that may create additional opportunities for development. For instance, of like an example that could be compact, lightweight refill packs for subscription models for online SKUs only. So I do see some of that falling short there. It's difficult, but replacement of cans for wet pet food, with flexible, retort, shelf-stable pouches, something that's portionable, easy to open, easy to handle, reclosable, at maybe more plays into the multiple use for like a topper or mixing that wet into dry so you don't have to use the whole entire can. So that's where maybe flexible packages falling short, but can help. It hasn't fully transitioned over there yet. Cans are still readily available, and a lot of equipment that has been purchased over the years for filling is part of the reason that a lot of these brands haven't switched. So I recognize that. But I think also we all need to be thinking about how we can design packaging together that can make an emotional connection with the pet owner and the furry friends. Think about convenience, interaction, bonding, special occasions. And finally, kind of mirroring human food aesthetic cues. So emulating food packaging that's on the shelf as that humanization trend continues to grow.
Well, I tell you what, it's almost like you were reading the chats because you kind of touched on two of the questions that we've got there already. We have one from Catherine that I'm going to go ahead and bring in now. She's asking, given the amount of pet food in various forms that is now shipped direct to consumer, what packaging considerations need to be considered about the packaging for that versus, excuse me, considered for the packaging of the food itself versus shipping packaging?
For the food itself, yeah. So I do see a potential increase for shipping an own container, meaning that package is going to have to act as the delivery package as well as the product protection. So I do see that. Again, there's a lot of abuse that the product packaging goes through in addition to the box or whatever it's shipped in. So considering how it bounces up against the side of the bags, how it's handled, there's so many more touch points for direct to consumer than there is from the retailer to the consumer. I don't know the statistic, but it's probably 2 or 3x or maybe even more times that package is touched or abused more when it comes to direct to consumer online shipping. So yeah, got to consider the toughness, the sealability, how to, my seal integrity, the puncture resistance. Is my product inside going to poke a hole through the side of the bag? So there's a lot of those things that we need to consider collectively as we talk about, direct to consumer online products. Hope
Yeah,
that helps answer that question.
yeah, it's definitely a growing trend. And you had also mentioned humanization. That brings up another question that we had from the audience. From Ryan, he was asking, what degree of pet food packaging trends mirror human CPG packaging trends? Humans make packaging decisions for pets, but are their purchase consideration factors different when buying for their pet versus themselves?
I think a lot of those being the same. That's a great question. I see more of that growing. I won't mention the brand specifically, but there's one out there that's got a line of cookies that you would never be able to tell that it's different from a tray full of cookies with with an easy open reclose feature on the top. It emulates a cookie package that you would buy for humans. So I see more of that trend happening. Again, I think pet owners are viewing pets as part of the family, and they're buying them as they are for humans. And so a lot of that crossover is going to continue to grow. So I think it's something that brands will need to pay attention to. And we as packaging producers and converters will need to pay attention to those as well, make sure we're meeting all the packaging requirements that on shelf can convey that.
Gotcha. And actually, we have a follow-up question about direct-to-consumer. So considering that it's likely that packaging optimized for e-commerce will become prevalent, they bring up the example that it seems like kind of a waste of cost and resources to have packaging and graphics and all that designed for the eye when it's just going to arrive through the mail like that. I'm thinking kind of like how Amazon now has some of their very simplified packages that they send things through. Is
Yeah,
there any movement towards that in the pet food packaging to make
I, I
simplified?
I do. I think there's an opportunity to differentiate the SKU at the SKU level online versus in store. I don't think that, me personally, that the graphics when it shows up is really necessary. I think if the consumer gets what they expect of their product, like, oh, yep, that's the product, that's good enough in a lot of those cases for direct to consumer. So I do think there's a different buyer there and different considerations for the packaging, but I do see an opportunity to reduce the packaging features and reduce the graphics that may not be necessary that would need to separate yourself on the store shelf. When people are buying online, they know what product they're going to buy. As long as they're getting that product, I think in a lot of cases they're happy with that. So that's my opinion.
Gotcha. Making some changes with the rise of direct to consumer. So let's consider a little bit about some of the specific categories. So there's specific categories within pet food where packaging limitations may actually be slowing down innovation or growth.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's specific limitations that are slowing down innovation or growth, but perhaps with sustainable packaging alternatives, they're not fully optimized in a lot of cases. So again, we talked about those trade-offs that we still need to consider and the overall adoption as being pretty slow. Again, one of the biggest drivers there is cost. And then we're still battling overall performance, whether it's barrier, heat resistance, or whatever that may be. But there's also that consideration of not just the product containing the product, but how that package goes through package forming, filling, and distribution that we need to consider. So maybe those things are limiting growth in that space, but I'm having a hard time with that one. I don't see a lot of things that prohibit or limit us from providing innovation and growth in this space. I will say that for the future of innovation and growth, we need to be thinking about new pet owners and the Gen Z in particular as our critical growth target. So the need to design products and packaging that speak to them, packaging that can create that emotional bond between the pet owner and their best friend. That's something that I think we need to think about a little bit more clearly here in the future.
Gotcha, gotcha. Helping to build that pet human bond. So it sounds like, if a pet food company makes it, you can package it up. But when those companies are coming to you, do they ever have expectations that might be a little bit beyond possibility? What are some of the common misconceptions that brands may
Sure.
have about packaging?
Yeah, we're seeing that. Maybe some more in the fresh food space. But brands are smart. They do have plenty of technical and marketing folks to guide them in the journey, but they still rely on us as a trusted advisor and as an expert to make good decisions with packaging. That's the reason we exist as converters. I would just say that don't assume that with any new application that flexible packaging is flexible packaging and not consider what can go wrong. We, in a lot of cases, are learning and can learn together. We need to design with intent and to make sure we on both sides are asking what's needed up front. Just speaking from experience here, what are we testing for? What are the protocols? What's the scale up? How does that commercialization plan? What does it look like? Reducing risk for all parties. That's the biggest thing I can say. Again, don't assume that sustainable options will work without testing. There's trade-offs in performance, we know, and every step of the process from forming to filling to distribution. We know it comes with a higher cost, but at least for now, until those economies of scales are reached. But at the same time, understanding that there's unique nuances that we need to pay attention to as we introduce new packaging structures and formats into the market as it continues to grow.
Gotcha. And as that market's continuing to grow and innovate, there's some new things coming in. Let's bring a question in here from the audience as it kind of ties into what we were about to go into. So James was wondering, are there innovations in packaging formats? Stand-up pouches were invented 50 years ago, flat bottoms 30 years ago. Material to volume ratio and partially empty pouches to half empty pouches or in these formats. What is in the market now, and what is the next evolution of pouches? Where's the innovation?
Yeah, I think we're seeing more of like lickable, like treat, like tubes, stick pack, like formats coming out for those unique, occasions. You're right. Stand-up pouches and flat bottom bags and large quad seal bags have been out for many years, but they've served a purpose and have done it well for conveying those products. So I do think that more of the innovation is going to come from smaller portion pack size, things that are easy open, reclose, a lot of different new features, especially on the treats and toppers, things like that, the smaller portion control packs that may be combined into a stand-up pouch, maybe as a secondary, SUP package that contain all those primary packages. But yeah, it's hard to say. I don't see a lot of change in the packaging formats that are out there. There may be just other formats that will grow within the pet space as the product and feeding occasions change. That's
Gotcha.
kind of that's where I see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and that actually tied into another question that we had here because you mentioned the little tubes and sticks there. We have a question from Paulina asking, is owners are increasingly viewing dogs as family, observing spa level wellness. What innovations in stick design, these little pouch type things, have you seen successfully extending probiotic shelf life while enhancing the ritual care moment of topping kibble with those little sticks?
Yep. Forgive me, I don't have a lot of experience specifically with packaging probiotic products, but I recognize that they probably require very high barrier performance. And so a lot of your traditional polyester, aluminum foil, polyethylene type materials will still function as a very good barrier performance with those types of packages. Aluminum foil, has its benefits for not only barrier, but for easy open and tear, which is required in a lot of those stick packs and probiotic tubes and things like that for adders. So that's something you have to consider from a consumer perspective as well, and how that package performs. If you were to make a transition to an alternative to aluminum foil, how does it behave differently? Maybe you have to laser score the package or create some type of scoring or something on the outside or some scuffing to create an easy open feature. Yeah, that's a challenge piece. I just don't know a lot of the answers on the probiotics specifically, but I can imagine it's going to be difficult to go away from any of those high barrier aluminum foil type packages for that.
Hmm. Yeah, probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, all of those things were something I very much noticed at Global Pet Expo and the new products. It's something that people are really using to help their products stand out. And standing out is important in a crowded marketplace. So what are some other ways, and how can packaging help brands stand out in the pet food marketplace?
We've touched on some of these already, Tim, but look to design something different is what I'd say. Look at the shelf and see what may help differentiate your packaging next to your competitors. We talked about stand-up pouches being used forever, but maybe consider something as simple as a very large stand-up pouch. Then instead of a flat bottom bag or a large laydown bag, maybe there's a cost advantage to doing that. But that also creates opportunity for a stand-up pouch with special features like easy open reclose and easy dispensing, handles, ease of use and pouring. There may be some convenience advantages that you can get with a stand-up pouch because of the lower cost versus those larger format flat bottom or lay down bags. I would say also consider connecting your packaging across lines with color and design, as I mentioned before, common elements for that multi-form feeding or common formats. I do see a tremendous opportunity for premium label brands that are growing. Consumers remain cost conscious, and that's the part of the reason that they are growing, but pouches and bags can appear generic or maybe even lower quality. So there's an opportunity to deliver premium private label packaging with even sustainable solutions or enhanced aesthetics like matte and soft touch finishes that can help grow those brands as well.
Gotcha. So speaking of some of those, different types of materials or different means of printing, that kind of technology is becoming a big part of this. So what role are there some new materials that you see on the horizon, or digital printing, smart packaging technologies that you see in the future of pet food packaging?
I still think we're a ways away from it, but I do feel like paper packaging will play a role at some level, especially in the smaller packs, portion packs, things like that. But new materials specifically, premium matte soft touch feels, paper touch, all can like evoke artisanal cues, especially on those smaller portion packs that exudes premium. Digital printing for sure can really help us with a lot of different things. Short runs is one of those, new product launches for brands, and just testing structures in the market. So if there's something that we may want to test a new sustainable solution, well, there's minimal risk if we do it through digital. We can do a very small run. It's fast speed to market, and in some cases, quick turnaround times. We have stocked recyclable materials on hand. That's something that we could turn around in a 2 to 3 week time frame with graphics. So it's a great way to do something fast and a product launch, test something with minimal risk. Digital also brings a certain element of personalization, randomization, variable design, everything that you could customize. So every pet owner and furry friend could have their own unique packaging, which is really cool to think about. So pet names, breeds, feeding tips, different QR codes, different videos, links to how you can interact with the package differently can all be brought really fast with a digital solution. We are limited, obviously, on web widths, but for a majority of stick packs, toppers, stand-up pouches, flow wrappers, things like that, digital works pretty well. Not so much on the large format bags. So it's something to think about too as we expand in digital printing. There's opportunity for retail exclusive SKUs as well. So that's a different way that brands could approach the market. And then offering some type of an augmented reality or scannable icon explaining health benefits. Something cool like that could be certainly incorporated in the future.
Interesting. Augmented reality pet food packaging.
We did something several years ago at Pack Expo where we actually had printed something there and we were able to scan it. And if you have your phone or some type of iPad or interactive device, it was a really cool like gaming automatic reality game that you could play. Pretty neat. That was just at the beginning of that. I'm sure it's come a long way since then.
Like Pokemon Go for pet food.
There you go.
So to wrap things up before we start taking the rest of our questions from the audience, let's just look at when companies are developing that next generation of pet food products, and what are some of the most important packaging considerations they should be thinking about today?
Yeah. I'd say find out what's most important to the consumer and think about ways to clearly communicate, your brand messaging on the packaging. Again, that's a canvas for you to demonstrate to the consumer and differentiate on shelf. Consider the format, the shape, the shelf appeal. Does it differentiate the ease of use, convenience, and functionality as one? How will that consumer and our best friends interact with that package? It's important to think about that. Consider how the package will be used. It's not just for product protection. It is the vessel to transport the product. So again, something to think about when we're talking about online, direct to consumer shopping and shipping in own container, things like that. Few other things, the majority of pet owners believe that, and this is no slang on the brands, that commercial pet food is overly processed. So again, it's something that a perception we have to get through. There's a belief that fresh pet food is healthier, it's more transparent than traditional options. So minimally processed products, considering transparency on the packaging and how you convey that.
Mm.
I believe that new pet owners are going to be more open to premium products, multi-form feeding, as we talked about, and even brand switching. So the last thing I'd say with the brand switching part is consider that smaller packaging portion size again, as newer pet owners and the Gen Z buying behaviors are showing that smaller packs makes it easier. And there's less commitment to try something new if you don't have to buy 10, 20, or 30 pounds of product. So again, there's tons of opportunities and weak signals out there that can suggest some opportunities for innovation and growth.
Yeah, there's a wide range of opportunities out there.
It's exciting. Yeah.
So let's take some questions from the audience and see what topics are on the minds of pet food professionals who've joined us today. So we have a question that is a little skeptical. Do you really need to show the product through a small window? Does it really make a difference to the consumer?
That's a great question. I think if you want to be fully transparent to the consumer, that a window is great. I know that's not a lot in the kibble, but as brands are demonstrating that fresh product is healthier and you want to, full transparency on the ingredients, being able to visually see what that product looks like, I think is important. I mean, it's not something that should be ignored. Is it absolutely needed? Probably not. But I do think it can really help convey the brand's messaging about that product being clean and transparent and healthier for you.
And we talked a little bit about premium materials, premiumization, and packaging does a lot to convey that. So I have a question from Abby asking, sometimes consumers can't tell how premium the material of a package is until they interact with it. So what's one of the best ways to make a stand out or differentiate your product to make sure the customer actually picks it up, actually feels that premium product, paper or packaging?
Soft touch, matte, tactile finishes, matte gloss appearance, and not just having it, but really focusing on spot matte and gloss and how it can enhance the graphic behind it. I still feel like metal reveal, so a metallic reveal through the package helps set off that package from the shelf. We talked about packaging formats being traditional with stand-up pouches and flat bottom bags, but is there ways that you could showcase the package differently on shelf? Is it packed a different way? Is it packed upside down or on its side? Is it cased out differently? Something that makes it pop on the shelf differently. So I think that's a great thing to brainstorm on, especially between a brand and a converter, and how you can go through that, exercise. But yeah, it's a lot of it's in the graphics, a lot of it's in something that when there's that 2 or 3 seconds that the consumer has when they see a package in there, they're either going to grab it, and if they're likely to grab it, it's going to go into the cart. So it's really getting it to pull off the shelf. That's the most important thing.
And when they pick it up, they're likely to put it down too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that actually kind of, a lot of what you were saying there kind of reminds me of those old Apple commercials. There was like, think different. And if you're thinking different about your packaging, and that also brings up the idea of, like, with tech, the whole idea of an unboxing is very important. The idea of like the very experience of opening a product. This isn't something we discussed before, but that's something, how can pet food packaging play into that kind of almost an unboxing experience? How can the packaging become an experience?
A good question, Tim. I'm not sure I know the answer to that one. I know that there's, influencers and when they purchase products and, demonstrate the unboxing and the videos, that it's important for that package to, or how it interacts with that person. I'm not sure, like the shape or format, maybe again, just being different or shocking, like not expected, just the way that the package like feels. And again, we talked about that premium like feel, like the tactile finish, like when someone picks it up, like, oh wow, this is something different. Maybe there's an opportunity to merge rigid and flexible, or think differently about, the package style or format or shape. Something that it's maybe has a 3D effect on it. Like, so when it's open and you look at it, it's like, oh wow, I can see something popping out at me out of the box. Like, I don't know. I think there's a
Absolutely right.
lot of opportunity for brainstorming and innovation on that space. So it's a great question. I just don't know if I know the answer to it. But I
Yeah.
don't do a lot of unboxing myself for online shopping, but I know it's a popular thing for sure.
Right. It's actually a thing on the socials now that influencers are feeding pet foods and filming their pets' reactions and things like that. I wonder if there's not some room in there for adding in pet food unboxing videos now too. Let's
Good
see.
one.
Okay. Sorry, one more question here that I think I might have missed before. As wallets tighten, is it worth it for brands to sacrifice valuable space on packaging to emphasize sustainability or CSR initiatives? Is the gain in consumer perception worth it?
Say that question one more time. I missed the beginning.
So it's as the economy is getting rough and people are looking to save a penny here or there, as well as are
Yeah.
tightening, is it worth it for brands to sacrifice that packaging space on the packaging to emphasize sustainability? Is the gain in consumer perception worth that loss of space that you could be promoting something else?
Yeah, that's a big dilemma. I understand that. I think that still consumers are looking for brands to lead the way in sustainability, either with the product and the packaging. So figuring out a way to convey that, I think, is still very important. Understand that there's costs associated with doing that. I think from a minimal cost standpoint, on the package itself, conveying sustainability messaging doesn't cost a lot. The use of maybe more sustainable materials or a sustainably sourced product, I get is more expensive for the consumer. But again, maybe there's ways to carve out smaller portion packs and things that you can have a lower cost point, but still make an effort to provide sustainable products and packaging to the consumer. I do think it's an important part, but again, that is a brand decision that is a difficult one, and it's outweighing that offering versus the shelf lift and the product lift, and is it really worth it? That is a very difficult question to answer, but we support any of our brands that really want to go after that. We 100% are supportive of their need and goals in that sustainability space, regardless. So I
Yeah.
know that kind of skated around that a little bit, but I appreciate the question.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer because it is, I suppose every consumer would be a little bit different for them. And it's
Sure,
such a
sure,
complex world now and so many things are influencing people that
definitely,
hard
yeah.
one to answer. All right. If anybody else out there has another question, we still have time for maybe one or two more. Otherwise, we're getting pretty close to the top of the hour, and we can go ahead and start finishing it up. All right. Those were some great questions, and I would like to thank
Thank
all
you.
of you for joining us. Did you have any final thoughts, Bill?
No, I think I kind of hit it. It's just, basically, again, consider, what's important to the consumer, what you think your brand should convey. Look for opportunities to innovate. Come talk to PrintPack. We're here to help. We want to be your packaging provider for pet care and pet care market. We're poised for great growth here. And we would love nothing more than to work with you guys on new opportunities and addressing some of these market trends and getting packaging out there that helps grow your brand. So thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity, Tim.
Thank you for joining us. But we did actually get one more question. The question is, how will headspace and wasted material play a factor in EPR or sustainability? So, reduce, reuse, recycle reduces the first one. What have you seen trying to maybe perhaps make packaging more efficient in the amount of, food per packaging?
That's a great one. So without sacrificing the overall structure, is reducing the package size. Again, it's a brand marketing like decision and how it gets displayed on shelf. As you reduce the size of the package, you're reducing your billboard, right? So there's an impact to that. But you are reducing overall package size. I can't speak to the answer with EPR of how that will work. Like, is that appropriate? Just reducing the package size, and what percentage does that get you to reduce raw material? But overall, the impact of that particular package will have a smaller environmental footprint from a LCA analysis because you're simply using less material. Thing that to be considered or cognizant of is if you do size it differently or make it smaller, is how it fills and then how it settles out as well. So that's important. So some of these bulk densities of products are different. It may settle out over time. You may have trouble filling to a certain amount with the reduced headspace in there as well. So those are all big questions you'll have to take on a case by case basis. But I like the idea of right sizing the package and not overly using wasted space or wasted materials for sure. I think that's a great way to think through being more sustainable in general.
And going back to like you're talking about billboard and the amount of space that people have available, if people aren't reading as much today, this is another question from Abby. If people aren't reading that material as much anymore, are you noticing a shift in how that affects pet food packaging if people aren't reading what's on it? Are designs becoming more simple or minimalistic?
I really haven't seen that effect. I don't know the answer if people really are reading less. I would have said that consumers, especially for the newer pet owners, are really paying attention to the packaging and the ingredients on there. Maybe for some of the older generations, that's a different approach. But I haven't really seen a lot of simplistic packaging. I've seen more and more of the premium looks and enhanced graphics and tactile finishes and different things more so than more simplistic packaging, in my opinion. I think folks interact with packaging differently, like whether or not they're actually reading it on the package or using their phones to scan something on the package and to get more information. I do think that's an opportunity to create more interaction with the consumer. So I think it's important to consider those types of things.
Gotcha. Giving people the information they want. And speaking of that, we have a question here about highlighting hero ingredients. Are there examples of packagings that are doing something different or unique, things that are really conveying or displaying some of those like functional ingredients or really displaying it? Are there standout brands you can name or just some examples?
In the fresh pet food space, you see Fresh Pet has just done a tremendous job in how they market their product with refrigeration in store. They've got a flat bottom bag, they've got stand up pouches, they've got chub packaging, all within that end of aisle refrigeration. That's been one of the most impressive things that I've seen as they grow and how accessible that product is at all of the retailers. So that's something that other fresh pet brands will have to compete against as well. But that's one example I could say that I've seen a flex in a lot of different formats, but all within that refrigerated space in a very unique environment. You know where to go to in the store to get that product. So that's a product differentiator for sure.
Gotcha. All right. So now we are coming up to the top of the hour. Let's see. Okay, we got one more here. There are new cold pressed dog aspect. Oh, I think I was just talking about that brand. And okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put a link in here for anybody that is interested in EPR. There's an article that I wrote a while about it that just kind of gives an overview if you wanted to get a little more into it. But now we are coming up to the top of the hour. And so we will go ahead and say thank you to everyone out there. And thanks again to Bill and our audience. And of course, I would like to give a great big thank you to PrintPack for sponsoring this edition of Ask the Pet Food Pro. Please watch for more Ask the Pet Food Pro chats brought to you by Pet Food Industry and Pet Food Forum. I'm Tim Wall, Senior Reporter for Pet Food Industry, and I'd like to say thanks again to PrintPack, Bill Barlow, Senior Market Development Manager at PrintPack, and a great big thanks to my colleagues at Watt Global Media and all the staff for helping make this possible. Thank you out there to our international audience for joining us, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day or evening, depending on which side of the planet you are on. Until next time on Ask the Pet Food Pro, goodbye.
Thanks so much.